On a misty western morning, a widow is abandoned in the wilderness not by the elements, but by the very people who once called her sister in Christ. They leave her to lie in the ice, as if her life were a mere discard. But as death draws near, one man, a wealthy, quiet cowboy with a heart scarred by the past, happens to be passing by. Is it fate, or just a good man's choice to defy his fears? If it were you between the boundary between life and death, between a trust that has been betrayed, would you have the courage to trust again? Have you ever been in a situation where just a timely hand could change your life? We invite you to step into this story, a journey of loss, rebirth, and small choices powerful enough to save a life. Before we begin, please like, share, and subscribe to support healing stories like this. Thank you so much. The wind had a way of cutting through a person that night, not just brushing past them the way winter breezes usually did. No, this wind sliced, sharp as a broken bottle, tearing along the ridgeline of Coyote Ridge like it carried judgment in its breath. Snow rolled off the cliffs in white sheets. The sky was a bruised gray, heavy and swollen, ready to break again. Even the pines stood stiff and silent, as if they had witnessed too much already. Emma Carter felt every inch of that merciless cold. Her wrists burned from the coarse rope biting into her skin. Her fingers had turned stiff. The color drained from them until they looked like they belonged to someone else. She could taste blood at the corner of her mouth where the gag rubbed her raw. Her cheek stung from the slap one of the settlers delivered just before they dragged her up the rocky slope. She did not cry out then, and she did not cry now. Not because she was brave, not because she was strong, but because she knew tears would freeze before they ever reached her chin. Coyote Ridge was not a place anyone survived alone in the dead of winter. Especially not a woman whose strength had been worn thin by grief before the cold ever touched her. Sam's face came to her first. Soft brown eyes. A tired smile he tried to hide at the end of long clinic days. The way he would squeeze her hand when words felt too heavy. Her husband had not been gone long. She could still hear the echo of his laugh in the small cabin they once shared. But the cabin had burned, and the people she once called neighbors had changed their eyes when they looked at her. Or perhaps she had changed, and only now could she see what had been there all along. "Leave her," Pastor Gideon Rollins ordered. His voice cut over the wind. Calm, steady, cold, like the snow that gathered on his hat brim. A woman who brings death should return to the dust. Judgment is not ours to question. Several of the men nodded. Their silhouettes stood rigid against the storm, long coats thrashing in the wind. They held lanterns that stretched golden circles over the snow. And in those circles, Emma could see their faces. She had once greeted at church, at town meetings, at Sam's clinic. Faces she had trusted. Now they would not even meet her eyes. They had dragged her nearly 2 miles from the edge of the settlement, up a trail slick with ice, past dead scrub brush poking through the snow like skeletal fingers. Emma had stumbled twice, knees slamming against the frozen earth. Each time, someone yanked her back to her feet, and each time, she wondered what her Sam would say if he could see this. She wondered if he would blame himself for leaving her alone in a world that could turn so quickly. "Untie her," someone muttered. "Or leave her bound." Rollins shook his head. "Bound. The Lord will free her if she is innocent." A low murmur ran through the men. Not agreement, not disagreement. Something in between. Fear always muddied things like that. When people were afraid, they became capable of things they could not imagine in the daylight. Emma lifted her head. Her hair whipped across her face, long dark strands catching snow. Her lips trembled from the cold, but she bit down on them until the trembling stopped. She tried to form Sam's name behind the gag, not out of desperation, but out of remembrance. The wind stole the sound. Then it happened. One of the men, Tom Wexley, a rancher with a soft-spoken wife and 2 little girls, stopped walking away. He turned back, looked straight at Emma, and for a moment, a flicker of the man she once knew appeared in his eyes. She was Sam's wife. Tom said quietly, "Sam helped all of us. Ain't right to Rollins raised a hand." Tom froze. "The righteous cannot allow the seed of plague to stay." Rollins replied, "Her husband fell because he tried to shield her. You saw the sickness. You saw how quickly it spread through the camp. A woman cursed by sorrow is a danger to all." Emma's heart lurched. Sorrow. That was her crime. Sorrow. And daring to say that the sickness came from bad water, not divine punishment. Sam had tried to fight the infection sweeping through the settlement. He had worked past exhaustion until it took him too. Emma had begged them to boil their water. To stop Rollins from convincing people it was a test of faith. She had spoken too loudly, too boldly, too soon after Sam's death. And people who are afraid often choose the cruelest explanation because cruelty feels like control. Tom Wexley dropped his gaze. Whatever spark he had felt died under the weight of obedience. The storm roared louder. Snow pattered against Emma's shoulders. Her breathing grew shallow as ice crept against her skin. "Push her near that rock outcrop," Rollins instructed. "The wind will make quick work of the rest." 2 men obeyed. They shoved her toward an overhang where the ridge narrowed. Just beyond the lip, the land fell away into a sharp drop nearly 120 feet straight down into a ravine full of jagged boulders and snowdrifts. Emma dug her heels into the ground out of instinct, but the rope around her wrists prevented her from keeping balance. She stumbled again. Her knees hit the ice once more. Rollins stepped closer. Lantern light illuminated the hard angles of his face. His eyes were small, flat, and unwavering. "You brought misfortune upon the settlement," he said, "and misfortune clings to those who challenge the path set out for them. The ridge will take your sins, and in the morning we will be free of your shadow." Emma wanted to speak, wanted to shout the truth, or at least die with dignity, but the gag silenced everything. Her breath fogged the air as she forced herself to look Rollins in the eyes. If this was the last thing she could give the world, then she would look unafraid. She was not unafraid, but she would look it. Rollins turned away. "Let us go." One of the younger men lingered. His voice shook as he whispered, "Pastor, she's still breathing strong. Storm's bad, but what if she makes it?" Rollins did not turn back. "Then the storm will not be the one to judge." The hint was clear. If nature did not finish her, someone else would. A final gust of wind howled past the ridgeline. Snow swirled around the group as they descended the slope, lanterns bobbing until their glow faded completely. Silence fell, a kind of silence Emma had never known, deep, heavy, echoing in the hollows of the ridge. She could hear the faint roar of wind sweeping across the canyon below, but up where she knelt, the world narrowed to the sound of her own heartbeat. Slow, weakening. She lowered her head. Her thoughts drifted back to Sam, to the night he had proposed with hands that trembled as if he feared she would decline, to the mornings he would brew coffee in the old tin pot, humming under his breath, to the last look he gave her from his sickbed, as if he hoped she would remember him not for the illness, but for the life they had built before it. Emma closed her eyes. "I am not ready." She tried to whisper behind the gag. "Sam, I am not ready to follow you yet." The cold had other ideas. Numbness crept along her legs, her fingertips pricked with pain. then nothingness. Her thoughts slowed until they felt like they were sliding away from her grasp. Then very faint, almost imagined. A sound, a distant clatter, a horse's hooves striking stone. Rhythm steady, getting closer, cutting through the wind like a heartbeat pressing against the dark. Emma lifted her head, her vision blurred. Snow drifted across her eyelashes. She tried to focus, but exhaustion dragged at her. Another hoofbeat, and another. A shadow moved across the ridge, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a heavy duster coat dusted with snow. A lantern swung from his saddle horn, casting a warm circle that pushed back the storm's gray. She wanted to call out, wanted to move, but she could not. The figure dismounted, boots crunched over the snow. The man paused, scanning the ridge with a caution that spoke of a life lived far from comfort. Then he saw her. His posture changed instantly, from wary to stunned. "Ma'am," he murmured, voice low, roughened by cold and miles of open country. "Dear God, who left you out here like this?" But Emma could no longer answer. Darkness seeped into her vision, a deep, heavy pull. The world tilted. Her last awareness was the warmth of large, calloused hands brushing snow from her cheek. A soft mutter, almost a prayer. Then everything went black. Elias Morgan had seen winter storms sweep across Coyote Ridge before, but never one quite like this. The sky looked bruised. The air felt mean. Even his stallion, Duke, shook his head as if trying to warn him to turn back toward the ranch. But something in Elias had kept him riding, a pull he couldn't explain, a tug deep inside his chest that felt almost familiar, a whisper that something or someone needed him on this ridge before the night was done. When he spotted the shape in the snow, he thought at first it must be a deer brought down by the storm. But as he drew closer, he saw the outline of a woman's figure, knees in the snow, shoulders slumped, head bowed, a rope still cutting into her wrists. Everything inside him went still. "Ma'am, don't you give up now." He knelt beside her. Snow stung his face, blowing sideways in thick sheets. He brushed the ice from her cheek and found skin cold enough to scare a grown man. But when his fingers pressed lightly to the side of her throat, he caught a faint, struggling pulse. Weak, faint, but still there. Duke snorted behind him, stamping his hooves. Elias looked around, scanning the ridge. Fresh tracks told the story. 6, maybe 7 men on foot and horseback had been here not long ago. Their prints led back toward the settlement. He cursed under his breath. Cowards. He didn't know the woman, didn't know her name, but he knew what abandonment looked like. He'd seen it before, years ago, when his mother died during a harsh winter and his father had walked out the door the next morning, claiming grief, but choosing freedom instead. Some people couldn't bear responsibility. Some hid behind excuses. Some hid behind religion. He looked back to the woman's pale face. Not this time, he thought. Not tonight. The rope around her wrists was frozen stiff. He tugged at it, but the knots refused to budge. He slipped out his hunting knife and carefully cut the bindings. Her hands fell limp to her lap. No shiver, no sound. "Come on now," he whispered, voice catching in his throat. "Stay with me. I've lost enough folks to winter." He slid one arm under her knees and the other around her shoulders. She weighed almost nothing. It scared him more than the storm itself. He lifted her slowly, mindful of her head resting against his coat. Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes like frost. Elias wrapped her in his heavy wool duster before mounting Duke with practiced ease, settling her carefully in front of him. He held her close with one arm while guiding Duke with the other. The ridge was unforgiving. Ice slicked the trail. The wind screamed across the open stretches. twice. Elias felt Duke slip, hooves scraping for purchase. But the stallion regained balance each time, ears pinned forward, understanding the urgency. "Easy, boy. We're almost to the lower trail." Elias leaned down, letting his hat shield the woman from the worst of the wind. Her head rested against his chest, and somewhere beneath the storm's roar, he could feel the faint rise and fall of her breathing. Fragile, uncertain, but alive. Alive was enough for now. By the time he reached the base of the ridge, the storm had begun to ease. Not by much, but enough for him to see the valley floor stretching out ahead. Lamplight flickered in the distance from the direction of Morgan Ranch, a welcome glow he never appreciated more than he did in that moment. His foreman, Henry Blake, was waiting near the barn with 2 ranch hands, lanterns raised. "Bossy, we saw your signal from the ridge. Everything all right?" "No," Elias answered, sliding down with the woman in his arms. His voice had dropped to that low, steady tone he used when things were bad. "Get Doc Avery. Now." Henry didn't waste a second. He sprinted across the yard for his horse. Elias carried the woman toward the house. Each step felt heavier, as if he could feel the weight of what had been done to her. A chill settled in his bones, a different kind than the storm's bite. Something darker. Someone had tried to erase this woman from the world. Inside the ranch house, a blaze burned in the stone fireplace, crackling warmly. Elias laid her gently on the long sofa near the fire. Her hair, dark and tangled with frost, lay like a shadow across the blanket he draped over her. Her breathing barely stirred. His housekeeper, Martha Walton, hurried in with a stack of quilts. "Good heavens! Elias! Who is she?" "Don't know," he answered. "Found her tied up on the ridge." Martha gasped, pressing a hand to her heart. "Lord, have mercy! Those settlers!" "Don't!" Elias said sharply. Then he softened. "Not yet. We don't know the whole story. But he would. He intended to find out." Martha helped arrange additional quilts over the woman. She worked quickly but gently, humming an old hymn under her breath, something about mercy being a quiet river. Elias stood a few paces back, arms crossed, watching the woman's face as if willing it to regain color. Her lips were pale. Her skin carried the bluish tint of cold too deep for comfort. Martha looked up. "You're shivering yourself? Sit down a moment." "I'm fine," he said. He wasn't. The storm had chilled him through, but he didn't notice half as much as he noticed the stillness of the woman on his sofa. The front door blew open, and Henry rushed in with Doc Avery. The old physician set his leather bag down with a thud and knelt beside the woman, hands already moving. "Name?" he asked. "Don't know," Elias replied. "Could barely keep her conscious long enough to get her off the ridge." Doc Avery checked her pulse, her breathing, and her skin temperature. His brows drew together. "She's hypothermic. Hands are frostbitten. She's exhausted, but she's not gone. We warm her slowly. Keep her hydrated when she wakes. Watch for fever." Martha hurried off to boil water. Henry stoked the fire until flames leapt high. Doc Avery and Elias worked together to carefully remove the frozen boots and damp stockings from the woman's feet, replacing them with warm cloths. Elias tried to keep his hands steady, but something raw knotted in his chest when he saw the rope marks on her wrists, the bruises, the scrape along her cheekbone where she'd fallen on the ridge. Someone had meant for her to suffer before dying. Doc Avery glanced at him. "Storm saved her life." Elias frowned. "Storm. If they'd left her earlier in the day," the doctor said, "exposure would have set in quicker. But the drop in temperature slowed her system. Gave you time to find her?" Elias exhaled slowly. "I wasn't planning to ride that trail tonight." Maybe someone else planned it for you, Doc Avery murmured, eyes softening. Elias looked back to the woman, her fragile breath, her stillness, her fight to stay alive even when everything seemed bent on stopping her. He felt something shift inside him, quiet, deep, familiar. A memory rose unbidden, his mother on her last night, the storm hammering the roof, her cold hands in his little ones, her voice a whisper. You listen to your heart, Elias. It knows who needs you, even before you do. He sank down in the chair beside the sofa, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Whoever she is, he said quietly, I'm not letting anyone touch her again. Martha returned with warm broth and clean cloths. She's safe here, she said gently, and we'll keep her that way. Doc Avery stayed for nearly an hour. Elias barely moved from his chair. He watched every rise and fall of her chest, every faint twitch beneath her eyelids. Once, she shifted, a small sound escaping her, her voice, or the echo of one. It hit him harder than he expected. When the doctor finally left, Elias remained beside her. The house grew quiet. The fire settled into a steady glow. Martha and Henry retired for the night. Snow continued to fall outside, soft and steady, as if trying to erase the footprints and signs of cruelty left behind on the ridge. Elias leaned back, his eyes never leaving the woman. Who are you? He whispered. And what did they do to you? He didn't expect an answer, but he hoped morning would bring one. Morning came slowly to the Morgan ranch, with the kind of muted light that suggested the storm had not fully passed, but was resting, gathering strength for later. Snow still clung to the windowsills. The sky was a pale silver, like old pewter, heavy but quiet. Inside, the ranch house held a soft warmth fire crackling low, wood settling with gentle pops, the smell of brewed coffee drifting through the hallway. Emma Carter did not wake to any of these things. She woke to darkness behind her eyelids, heat against her cheek, the faint weight of blankets tucked around her. At first she didn't know where she was. She felt the softness beneath her, smelled pine smoke instead of the burning cold of Coyote Ridge. Her fingers twitched, and pain shot through them like tiny needles reawakening nerves nearly frozen. A low sound escaped her half-gasp, half-whimper. It was enough. A chair scraped gently against the wooden floorboards, slow, steady, unhurried. A man's voice followed, roughened with sleep yet careful, like he was afraid to startle her. Easy now, he murmured. You're safe. Don't try to sit up yet. Her eyes fluttered open. At first, everything blurred. She blinked, trying to clear the fog. Her vision sharpened slowly first, the stone fireplace glowing with amber light, then the wooden beams above her, and finally, the man sitting beside her. He was tall even when seated, broad in the shoulders, with a worn leather coat slung over the back of the chair. Snow still clung to the edges of his dark brown hair, though his face held warmth where the firelight touched it. His jaw was strong, marked with faint stubble, his hands large, steady, calloused, rested loosely on his knees, and his eyes were a deep, steady brown, not demanding, not intrusive, watching her the way someone might watch a wounded animal letting it choose whether to trust. Emma stared at him, breath shallow. For a moment, she could not form a single thought. Only sensations filtered through the warmth, the ache in her body, the echo of fear still clinging to her spine. Where? Her voice cracked, dry as creek bed dust. She swallowed, tried again. Where am I on my ranch? He said gently. Morgan Ranch. I'm Elias Morgan. He hesitated, then added, You've been here since last night? Her brow creased, confusion mixing with caution. Last night. You were on Coyote Ridge. His tone softened with memory. Storm nearly took you. If I'd ridden by an hour later. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Images hit her all at once. Snow, rope, lanterns, men's silhouettes fading into the storm. Pastor Rollins' voice echoing like a curse. Emma's chest tightened. Her breath quickened before she could stop it. Elias noticed immediately. Hey, he said quietly, leaning forward. You're safe here. Nobody's coming through that door unless we let them. Emma's gaze darted around the room. She saw no ropes, no shadows waiting in corners, just a warm room, a sturdy sofa, a quilt draped over her that smelled faintly of cedar and lavender, a small side table with a tin cup of water, and Elias. He didn't loom, didn't crowd her. He gave her space even while sitting only a few feet away. Something about that steadiness steadied her. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Why did you help me? Elias blinked, as if surprised she'd ask. Because you needed help. Then, after a beat, and because someone meant for you not to make it home. I won't stand for that kind of thing. His certainty was quiet, not boastful, just the calm conviction of a man who'd made up his mind long ago about the kind of person he intended to be. A memory stabbed through her the settlers' faces as they turned away, their lanterns bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps until darkness swallowed them whole. Something inside her trembled. The question rose before she could stop it. Did you see them? The men who left you? Elias's jaw tightened. Only their tracks. 7 of them. Fresh. Headed toward the settlement. The room tilted slightly. Emma pressed a hand to her forehead. He reached for her cautiously. Mind if I help you sit up? For a moment she hesitated, not because she feared him, but because her body felt foreign, untrustworthy. Still, she nodded. Elias slipped an arm behind her shoulders. His touch was warm and careful, supporting her without pulling. He guided her slowly into a sitting position, propping pillows behind her. When she settled, he withdrew just as gently. You've been freezing half the night, he said. Take it slow. Emma clutched the quilt around her shoulders. Her voice barely carried. I don't understand why you were out there. Elias leaned back in his chair, gaze drifting to the fire. Truth is, I wasn't supposed to ride that trail. Duke, my horse, kept tugging that direction. Never seen him act that way. Figured I ought to trust his instincts. His eyes returned to her. Lucky he did. She didn't know what to say to that. Gratitude felt too small for what he had done, too fragile for the whole weight of it. A soft knock sounded at the doorway. Martha Walton entered carrying a steaming mug of broth. Her gray braid hung down her shoulder, her face lined with years of ranch life but touched with kindness. Well now, Martha said gently. Morning, dear. Glad to see those eyes open. She set the mug on the side table. Let's try a sip, if you can. Emma's fingers trembled as she reached for the mug. Elias moved his hand, halfway not grabbing it, just in case she needed help. But she steadied herself and managed a small sip. Warmth spread through her throat, easing the dryness. Thank you, she murmured. Martha smiled. You just focus on getting better. Elias, fetch another blanket. This room still carries a draft. He rose immediately, retrieving a thicker quilt from a cedar chest. He draped it gently over Emma's shoulders, hands lingering only long enough to make sure she was comfortable. Her heart fluttered at the unexpected tenderness. When Martha left, Emma looked at Elias again. The question she most feared rose from somewhere deep inside, pushing past her hesitation. Will, Will they come looking? Elias didn't answer right away. He pulled his chair closer, not too close, but enough that she didn't have to raise her voice. Whoever those men were, he said carefully, they weren't strangers. Judging by their tracks, they knew that ridge, knew where to leave someone so she wouldn't be found. Emma's breath hitched. Elias continued, slower now, his voice steady as bedrock. I don't know their reason yet, but I know this. They won't get near you here. His certainty wrapped around her like another blanket. Still, memories clawed at her. The pastor's voice, the accusations, the cruel twist of Scripture, the way Tom Wexley couldn't meet her eyes. She closed her own eyes tight, as if to hold the memories back. Elias noticed the shift in her breathing. Emma, he said gently, you don't have to explain anything right now, but when you're ready, I'll listen. She hesitated. The truth felt heavy, but silence had been her punishment in the settlement. Maybe here, it could be her strength. She opened her eyes. My husband, she whispered. Sam, he tried to save them, tried to stop the sickness, but they said he died because he challenged God's will. Her voice trembled. When I disagreed, when I said it was the water, Pastor Rollins said sorrow had cursed me, that I carried misfortune. Elias's eyes softened, but his jaw hardened. And misfortune, she continued bitterly, was something the settlement couldn't tolerate. The room fell still. Elias didn't speak for several seconds. When he finally did, his words were low, firm, carved with conviction. What they did to you wasn't faith, he said. It was fear dressed up in Scripture. Emma swallowed hard. Her voice cracked. They left me there to die. And you didn't, he said simply. You're here. You're alive. And what they wanted from you, they won't get it. Her breath shuddered. Tears pricked her eyes, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in months. Relief. For the first time since Sam died, someone believed her. Someone didn't look at her with suspicion or superstition. Someone spoke truth without flinching. Elias watched her quietly, as though giving her space to feel everything she needed to feel. Then, in a voice as gentle as a warm evening breeze, he added, You're not alone anymore, Emma. The words settled in the quiet room like a promise, not rushed, not forced, just honest. Emma looked down at her hands still bruised, still trembling, but now warmed by the firelight, warmed by safety she couldn't yet understand, but could feel settling around her. She whispered, barely audible, I don't know how to thank you. You don't owe me thanks, Elias replied. Just rest. Let yourself come back to the world. She exhaled slowly. For the first time in weeks, her breath didn't feel like a battle. Outside the window, the storm began to lift. A pale band of light stretched across the horizon, fragile but growing. Inside the ranch house, something else began to thaw too quietly, gently, but undeniably. Two lives, once strangers, had just taken their first step toward intertwining, not through intention, not through destiny, but through survival, and through a kindness that arrived in the darkest moment of one woman's life. The kind of beginning neither would have chosen, but the kind of beginning that changes everything. For the next 2 days, Emma Carter drifted in and out of sleep as if her mind were wading through a slow, warm river. Each time she woke, the world felt a little less sharp, the room a little brighter, the pain in her fingers a little duller. The cold no longer clung to her bones, the way it had when Elias carried her off Coyote Ridge. It was a strange kind of healing quiet, stubborn and steady. Martha Walton tended to her with a gentle firmness that reminded Emma of the way Sam used to care for his patients. Warm broth, clean bandages, a steady voice humming old hymns from a time when faith was a comfort, not a weapon. Henry Blake checked the windows and doors at least 3 times a day, pretending he was just passing through the main room. But Emma saw the way his eyes drifted to the ridge each time he crossed the front porch. He never said a word, but his vigilance spoke louder than anything else. And Elias Morgan was never far. He didn't hover. He didn't pry. He simply existed in the same space, quiet but present, splitting firewood outside, mending harnesses at the long table, repairing a loose board on the porch. His movements were the kind born from years of ranch life, slow enough to be thoughtful, firm enough to be dependable. Emma found herself listening for him even when she didn't mean to. The sound of his boots on the porch, the scrape of his chair, his low voice speaking with Henry, the soft whistle he used when brushing down Duke. She wasn't used to the presence of a man who didn't demand anything from her. It unsettled her. It comforted her. It confused her. All at once. By the morning of the 3rd day, a thin strip of sunlight filtered through the frost-covered window. Emma sat propped up with Martha's help, her fingers wrapped around a warm mug. The broth tasted of thyme and tenderness. Martha sat across from her, knitting needles clicking softly. "You're healing well," she said. "Stronger today than yesterday, and tomorrow you'll be stronger still." Emma managed a faint smile. "I don't feel strong." "Strength don't always feel like strength." Martha continued knitting without looking up. "Sometimes it's just living through the night. Sometimes it's letting someone else take the reins for a spell." Emma lowered her gaze. "I've never been good at that." "Most folks aren't," Martha said, her voice warming. "But you're learning." Emma sipped the broth, feeling a tiny ember of something almost like hope stir in her chest. Before she could examine the feeling, the front door swung open. Cold air rushed in, carrying a gust of winter and the scent of horses. Elias entered, snow still clinging to his coat. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes went straight to Emma. "You're up." His voice softened, more relief than statement. "Good." Emma felt an unfamiliar warmth rise to her cheeks. She wasn't sure how to respond, so she said the safest thing she could think of. "Morning, Mr. Morgan." He shook his head lightly. "Elias? No need for formalities." She hesitated. "Elias. Then—" The sound of his name felt grounding, like a hand resting steady on her shoulder. Martha stood and gathered her yarn. "I'll fetch more broth. You two talk." Emma's breath hitched. She didn't know why those words made her heart beat differently, but they did. Elias removed his gloves and pulled a chair closer, but he didn't sit right away. He studied her carefully, noting the improvement in her color, the faint steadiness returning to her hands. "How do you feel?" he asked. "A little stronger," she admitted. "Still tired. That's expected." He finally sat, elbows resting on his knees. His gaze was steady, quiet, searching. Emma's pulse quickened. "Henry found tracks this morning," he said. "On the eastern ridge." She froze. Her fingers tightened around the mug. The warmth suddenly felt too hot. Elias noticed. "Easy. You're safe here." "Tracks," she whispered. "Are they—" "From the settlement." Elias didn't answer immediately. He leaned back, letting his silence soften the blow before speaking. "Fresh tracks. 2 horses. They didn't get close, but they were watching." Emma's breath stuttered. Watching. Just like before. Just like men waiting for permission to take her away. She shut her eyes, trying to breathe through the rising panic. But fear had memory, sharp and unyielding. She felt Elias move, not toward her, but to the fire, adding 2 thick logs. The crackle filled the room, grounding the moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "They're not stepping foot on this property." Her eyes opened. His posture was steady, not reckless, not angry, just the calm certainty of a man who had survived storms harder than this. Emma swallowed. "Pastor Rollins won't let this go. He believes Sam and I brought misfortune. He'll twist Scripture until the people fear him again." Elias nodded slowly. "I've known a few men like him. They mistake fear for faith, and power for purpose." Emma bit her lip. Her voice wavered. "They won't stop. Not now that they know I'm alive. And I won't stop either," Elias said. "Not now that I know what they did." The words hit her harder than she expected. He didn't say it like a vow, or a promise, or a declaration. He said it like a simple truth, as clear and unavoidable as sunrise. Emma held the mug tighter, fighting the tremor in her hands. Why help me? Elias truly. Why his gaze didn't waver? Because someone tried to erase you. And I don't believe in letting the world lose good people to the selfishness of others. She blinked, startled by the sincerity. Elias continued, softer now. And because, when I saw you on that ridge, I saw someone who had not been given a choice. I can't undo what they did, but I can give you back your choices. Her throat tightened. She looked down, unable to hold that gaze. She felt something she hadn't felt since Sam died, not safety. Exactly, but a sense of being seen, of mattering. The front door opened again, and Henry stepped in, shaking snow off his jacket. "Boss," he said, "riders coming down the west slope. I counted 3. Could be nothing. Could be something." Emma's heart stilled. Elias stood immediately. "Martha," he called, "stay with Emma." Martha reappeared instantly, knitting abandoned, her eyes sharp and protective. Emma watched Elias pull on his gloves, his coat, his hat, the movements practiced, deliberate. For a moment, she saw not just a rancher, but a man who carried a lifetime of responsibility on his shoulders. He turned to her. "You stay inside. Don't stand near the windows. And don't worry, Henry and I will handle it." Emma nodded, though fear crawled beneath her skin. The last time men rode toward her, death followed behind them. Elias paused, held her gaze. "You're not alone," he repeated quietly. "Remember that." Then he stepped out into the cold. Emma's breath trembled. She listened to the muffled thud of boots on the porch, the low murmur of men preparing to face danger. A fresh gust of wind rattled the windows. Martha moved beside her. "He'll be back, dear. Elias always comes back." Emma wasn't sure if the reassurance was meant for her or for Martha herself. Minutes stretched into long, thin strands of silence, then voices, raised, sharp, angled with tension. Emma gripped the blanket, heart pounding. She couldn't hear the words clearly, but she recognized the tone, the kind of brittle diplomacy men used when trying not to draw guns. Martha stepped closer to the door, but stayed inside, listening carefully. "Who is it?" Emma whispered. Martha's lips thinned. "Settlers. 3 of them. Not Rollins. Not yet." Emma's pulse thundered in her ears. What if they demanded to search the house? What if they carried rope? What if they came with orders? What if the darkness she'd escaped had finally caught up? The door opened suddenly. Emma flinched. Elias stepped inside, snow scattering from his boots. His expression wasn't angry, but it was darker than she'd yet seen it. Determined, unyielding. He shut the door behind him and removed his hat slowly. "They know you're alive," he said quietly. Emma's breath left her lungs like a struck match. "Did they see me?" she whispered. "No." Elias shook his head. "I didn't let them. They asked questions. I gave fewer answers." Henry entered behind him, jaw tight. "They're uneasy, Miss Carter. Not all of them wanted to be here." One of the riders was shaking something fierce. Elias looked at her, voice steady. "Emma, whatever story Pastor Rollins is telling, it's starting to crack." She blinked. "Crack. There's fear in them," Elias said. "Fear and doubt. That means his hold over them is slipping. Men controlled by fear stand firm. Men controlled by doubt make mistakes." Emma swallowed hard. And when men like Rollins feel their power slipping, they get desperate. Elias finished. A silence settled. Not the kind that crushed her, not the kind that came with rope and snow and betrayal. A different kind. A preparing kind. Elias knelt beside the sofa, not too close, but close enough that she felt steadier just seeing him there. "Emma," he said quietly, "you've been running from them long enough. You don't have to run any more." Her eyes stung. Tears she'd held back for months suddenly rose, unbidden and unstoppable. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to hide the trembling. Elias didn't reach for her. He waited, letting her feel what she needed to feel, letting her break without falling, letting her breathe through the fear instead of being swallowed by it. Finally, in a voice thin but resolute, she whispered, "I don't want to run anymore." Elias nodded once slow, strong, and certain. "Then we won't," he said. "Not now. Not ever again." And for the first time in a long, aching season of loss, Emma Carter believed it. Snow softened in the days that followed, settling into long drifts that curved gently along the fence lines. The wind, once sharp and punishing, lost its edge and drifted through the valley like an old man tired from shouting. Everything slowed, everything quieted, and inside the Morgan ranch, the quiet found its own rhythm. Emma Carter woke each morning to the scent of brewing coffee and the soft clang of metal from the barn, where Henry Blake tended the horses. By noon, she had enough strength to walk from the sofa to the window, and by the end of the week, she could make her way to the table for meals, though Martha kept one cautious hand hovering behind her, just in case. Elias Morgan remained a steady presence, not intrusive, not looming, just there, working, repairing, checking the fences, riding Duke across the lower pasture with that same strong, silent posture that made him look like part of the landscape. It was the kind of steadiness that soothed the soul without the soul realizing it was being soothed. On the 8th morning, Emma sat by the window wrapped in one of Martha's thick quilts. Frost still kissed the edges of the glass, but sunlight spilled across the wooden floorboards like a soft blessing. She watched Elias outside. He was repairing a loose rail on the corral fence, sleeves rolled to his forearms, breath visible in the crisp air. Each motion was slow and deliberate, measured, confident. He wasn't a man who rushed anything, not even the fixing of a fence that had stood for 20 years. Emma couldn't look away. It startled her, that realization. She looked down quickly, drawing in a long breath. "You're staring again," Martha's voice said lightly from behind her. Emma nearly dropped her mug. "I wasn't, sweetheart," Martha chuckled. "I'm old, not blind." Emma's cheeks warmed. "I'm just grateful. He's been kind." Martha hummed, sliding a skillet onto the stove. "Kind men draw the eye faster than handsome ones. Lucky for you. He happens to be both." Emma let out a soft laugh, her first real one in months. The sound surprised her. It surprised Martha, too, whose smile softened. "You're healing," Martha said quietly. "Bit by bit." Emma lowered her gaze. "Some days, I believe that. Other days, I worry I'm only pretending." Martha set a warm hand on her shoulder. "Pretending is just practice for the real thing. Keep practicing." Emma wanted to hold on to those words. She also wanted to believe them. But a weight still sat deep inside her, a memory that did not ease with warmth or shelter. The memory of the ridge, the snow, the betrayal, and Sam. Always Sam. Later that afternoon, Emma stepped outside for the first time, wrapped tightly in her quilt. The air was cold but sweet, the kind that filled her lungs in a way that made her feel present, alive. The world before her was a stretch of white and gold, the sun catching the frozen ground and turning it into something almost magical. Elias turned at the sound of her footsteps. For a moment, he looked like he wasn't sure she was real. "You should still be resting," he said gently, though the warmth in his voice contradicted any reprimand. "I've rested enough," Emma replied softly. "I wanted some fresh air." He nodded toward the fence. "Walk slow. Ground slick in patches." Emma smiled faintly. "You sound like Sam did." Elias stilled. She regretted the comparison the moment it left her mouth. But Elias simply wiped his hands on a cloth and leaned back against the rail. "You miss him," he said, not as a question, but a truth. Emma wrapped the quilt tighter. "Every day." He nodded. "Loss doesn't leave. It just settles into a place where you can walk around it." She looked up at him. "Does it settle for you?" Elias's eyes drifted toward the distant hills, toward a place she sensed held memories for him. "It has," he said quietly. "Mostly. Some days more than others." They stood together in the cold silence. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It felt companionable, like two people who understood sorrow so well that they didn't need to fill the space between them with words. After a while, Elias cleared his throat. "Feel up to helping with something small?" Emma hesitated. "Depends on what it is." He smiled a small, rare, almost shy smile that softened the stern lines of his face. "Feeding the hens." Emma let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "I think I can manage that." He walked beside her. Not too close, not too far. Just enough to steady her if she slipped. The hen house was only a short walk, its roof dusted with snow, its door slightly crooked from years of Wyoming winters. Inside, the hens clucked lazily, shifting in their straw. Elias handed Emma a small wooden bucket of feed. "Slow shakes. Let it scatter." She obeyed, the little seeds spreading in a soft patter across the floor. The hens rushed forward, clucking eagerly. Emma watched them with a small smile. "They're lively," Elias chuckled. "They're greedy, but lively feeds into greedy, so it works out." She laughed again, soft, hesitant, but true. It felt good, too good, almost dangerous. As if sensing her shift, Elias grew thoughtful. "Emma," he said quietly, leaning against the doorframe, "I don't want you to feel you owe us anything. Not for staying, not for healing, not for being alive." Her hand stilled on the bucket. Her voice came out low. "Then why? Why are you doing all this?" He hesitated, then spoke with the weight of a man who didn't waste words. "Because it was the right thing to do." A pause. "And because I know what it's like to be left in the cold." Emma's breath caught. She wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to know what shadows followed him, but she sensed asking would push too far. Instead, she let the quiet return, letting his words settle into the warm, dim air of the hen house. As they walked back toward the ranch house, something flickered at the edge of Emma's vision, a shadow moving near the line of pines. She froze. Elias sensed it instantly. "Emma, there," she whispered, pointing. Elias followed her gaze. Only silence. The trees stood motionless, heavy with snow. But something inside Emma remembered the ridge, remembered the feeling of being watched, hunted. "It was nothing," she said quietly, though she wasn't sure. Elias didn't argue. He only scanned the tree line until his posture eased. "Let's get you inside," he said, "back in the house." Martha greeted them with warm cornbread and a pot of beef stew simmering on the stove. Emma ate slowly, grateful for the warmth spreading through her. But when night fell, unease crawled beneath her skin again. The moon was a thin, pale slice above the valley. The wind picked up. Not a storm. Not yet, but enough to make the rafters creak. Elias checked the windows. Henry checked the barn. Martha locked the back door twice, just before bed. Emma stood by the fireplace, warming her hands. Elias approached quietly. "You saw something earlier," he said. Not accusing, just observing. Emma swallowed. "Maybe just movement. Maybe just my mind. Maybe—" He paused, but maybe not. He stepped beside her, both of them facing the fire. "I want you to know," Elias said softly. "You don't have to be afraid alone anymore." Emma closed her eyes. The flames crackled between them, throwing shadows that danced against the walls, shadows that looked like memories, shadows that looked like warnings. Then a sudden loud knock on the door. Emma jumped. Elias moved. Fast, silent, controlled. Henry appeared from the hallway, shotgun in hand. Martha's knitting dropped to the floor. The knock came again. Firm, heavy, intentional. Elias reached the door, paused, drew a slow breath. He opened it. A gust of cold rushed in. And standing on the porch, hat in hand, eyes troubled, was Sheriff Harlow Briggs. "Evening, Elias," the sheriff said, his voice tight. "We need to talk." Emma's heart stilled. Whatever peace she had found in the last few days was about to be tested. The sheriff's boots were heavy on the wooden porch, leaving dark, wet prints that faded into the grain of the boards. The icy wind rushed in behind him until Leisha shut the door and sealed the cold outside. The warmth of the house wrapped around them again, but the atmosphere had changed. Something tense, urgent, had entered with Sheriff Harlow Briggs. He removed his hat slowly, his lined face grave, but not unkind. "Evening, Martha." "Henry," he greeted with a nod. Then his eyes shifted to Emma, softening, troubled, recognizing something fragile in her. "Mrs. Carter," he said gently. "Good to see you on your feet." Emma held her quilt tighter. "Sheriff." Her voice was barely above a whisper. She couldn't tell if she was grateful to see him or afraid of the trouble his presence meant. Elias stepped between them just enough to shield her without making it obvious. "What brings you here?" "Harlow." The sheriff glanced at Elias, then back at Emma, then finally motioned toward the dining table. "We'd best sit. What I've got to say isn't pleasant." They gathered around the table, Elias at Emma's side, Martha and Henry across, and Sheriff Briggs settling down with the weight of a man carrying news that could crack open a world. He cleared his throat. "Someone sent me a letter," he began. "No name, no handwriting I recognize, but it held information about the settlement at Coyote Ridge." Emma stiffened. The sheriff continued, voice measured. "The letter said a group of men took a woman from her home 2 nights back, dragged her out of town, left her on the ridge to die." Silence fell heavy in the warm room. Emma's fingers trembled beneath the quilt. Elias's hand rested lightly on the table near hers, not touching, but close enough to anchor her. Sheriff Briggs went on, his jaw tightening. I rode the settlement yesterday morning. Asked questions. Pastor Rollins claimed you'd left of your own accord. Said the grief had broken your spirit. Emma felt her stomach twist in knots at the lie. He told people you were dangerous. The sheriff continued quietly. That sorrow had infected you. That you carried misfortune. Same words he used before. Well, before some suspicious things happened there. Henry leaned forward. What suspicious things? The sheriff sighed heavily. Deaths. 4 of them. Folks wrote them off as accidents. But that letter named each one, and it all pointed in a troubling direction. Emma's breath hitched. She knew the names. She'd written them in Sam's old notebook. She'd carried that notebook with her the night they left her to die. The sheriff reached into his coat and pulled out that very notebook. Emma's heart stopped. He placed it gently on the table. This was found half frozen at the ridge, close to where Elias rescued you. Emma stared at the familiar worn leather cover, the edges still stained from Sam's hands, the small tear on the bottom corner he'd never gotten around to fixing. Her vision blurred. I thought I lost it, she whispered. Elias looked at her gently. I didn't see this when I found you. Tracks must have knocked it loose from her coat, the sheriff said. Lucky I saw it when I rode up there. Pages were stuck together with frost, but I got them open. His eyes moved to Emma. You wrote the names. She nodded, tears forming. Sam told me before he died. Those people didn't fall sick naturally. He believed Rollins hid the real cause. He said the water was contaminated. Rollins silenced him. And you continued the work, the sheriff said quietly. That's why they turned on you. Emma's throat tightened painfully. Yes, she whispered. Sam warned them. He begged them to boil the water. But Rollins said sickness was a trial of faith. When Sam died, they blamed me for questioning him. The sheriff exhaled slowly. Rollins has twisted scripture before, but this crosses into something darker. Elias leaned forward. What do you need from us? Harlow information, the sheriff replied, and protection. He looked at Emma with genuine concern. Mrs. Carter, you're the only one left who knows the truth. Emma's fingers went numb. She clasped the quilt tighter. Martha reached across the table, her warm hand covering Emma's trembling one. You're not alone, dear. Not anymore. Emma swallowed hard, feeling both strengthened and overwhelmed by the support. Sheriff Briggs continued. Rollins is losing his grip on the town. That's why he's dangerous. A man desperate to keep control is the deadliest kind. A faint sound came from outside, the horses shifting in the barn, or maybe a wind scraping against the siding, but Emma jolted anyway, nerves raw. Elias's voice dropped low, protective. No one will lay hands on her again. That's my word. Henry nodded firmly. Mine too. Sheriff Briggs studied Elias for a long moment, then nodded. I figured you'd say that. He folded his hands on the table. But there's more. The letter didn't just name the victims. Emma's heart thudded. Sheriff Briggs paused, gathering his thoughts. It named the man who helped Rollins cover it up. The room seemed to shrink, Martha whispered. Who? The sheriff's eyes darkened. Luke Harrison. Henry cursed under his breath. Luke. That boy's been working fences here for months. Elias's expression hardened like stone. He's been disappearing at odd hours, asking questions he shouldn't. I knew something was wrong. Emma felt a cold dread creep into her spine. Luke, young, eager, polite on the surface, yet with eyes that lingered too long, asking questions that felt too pointed. She shivered. The sheriff continued. Luke reported back to Rollins. Might have even been the one who helped take Emma out of her home. Hard to know how far he's involved. Emma pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting a sudden wave of nausea. Martha wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Oh, child, you've been carrying too much alone." Elias pushed back his chair abruptly. The wooden leg scraped harshly against the floor. "Where is he now?" The sheriff shook his head. "Didn't see him in town. Could be hiding. Could be watching." Emma froze. Watching. The shadow she thought she saw by the tree line. The sense of eyes following her. The prickle on her neck when the wind blew from the pines. Her voice trembled. "He was here." Elias turned sharply toward her. "When that day, near the fence," she whispered, "I thought it was nothing." Henry swore again quietly. Elias's jaw tightened until the muscle twitched. Sheriff Briggs leaned back, thinking, "Rollins will want you silenced, Mrs. Carter, especially now that I know what's in that notebook. But he won't move openly yet. He avoids blood on his hands if he can help it. But his followers," Henry said, "they're another story." The sheriff finished. Silence fell, the heavy, listening kind. Emma's pulse beat in her throat. Elias finally stood, slow and steady, the way a man does when he's made up his mind. "Harlow," he said, "she stays here, under my roof, under my protection. If Rollins makes a move, he'll answer to me." The sheriff studied Elias's face, then nodded. "I trust you more than anyone out here." He stood and placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. "You're brave, Mrs. Carter. Braver than you know. But don't carry this alone anymore." Emma felt tears sting her eyes again. "I'm trying not to." Elias's voice came from behind her, firm as a pledge. "You're not." Sheriff Briggs put on his hat. "I'll return in 2 days, maybe sooner." He opened the door. Cold air rushed in, carrying a hint of rising wind. Before stepping out, he looked at Elias. "Keep a gun handy?" Elias nodded once. The door closed. The house felt quieter, heavier, more fragile and more protected all at once. Emma sat still, letting the warmth of the fire brush her cheek. Her heart thudded. Her fingers shook. But beneath the fear, beneath the dread of what Rollins planned next, a strange sense of strength began to bloom. Small, but growing. She looked toward Elias. He met her gaze with the calm of a man who didn't abandon the wounded. Not ever. Whatever storm was coming, she wasn't facing it alone. Night settled over the Morgan ranch with a weight thicker than the cold. The moon climbed slowly above the pines, a thin slice of pale silver that barely cast enough light to soften the darkness. The valley below lay quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that pressed against the windows and made the lamps flicker as if they sensed something waiting in the shadows. Emma Carter could not sleep. She sat in the main room, wrapped in a quilt, staring at the fire as it cracked softly. Her thoughts moved like slow water, heavy, carrying memories she wanted to forget, carrying fears she tried to bury. The sheriff's words kept echoing. Luke Harrison, a familiar face, working here, walking these floors, eating at this table, laughing with Henry in the barn. Emma felt a tremor run through her. He had been here, close, watching, listening. The realization made her chest tighten in a painful, breathless way. She had lived so long in fear at the settlement that even safety now felt fragile like glass warmed by fire, but ready to crack if touched wrong. A soft sound came from behind her. Bootsteps, slow, even familiar. Elias stopped near her, not speaking right away. He simply lowered himself into the chair beside hers, elbows on his knees, hat in hand. His face held that quiet, steady expression she now recognized as his way of thinking deeply before choosing his words. "You should rest," he said gently. "So should you," Emma replied, though her voice was small. He huffed softly, barely a chuckle. "I will, once I'm sure all is well outside." She hesitated, watching the flames. "Are you worried Elias didn't pretend?" He didn't mask his fears. That was one of the many things Emma had begun to admire. "I am," he answered. "But worry don't stop a storm. It just helps you see where to brace the fence." Emma pulled the quilt tighter around herself. "I hate that this has brought trouble to your doorstep." He turned toward her, not sharply, not startled, just steady. "You didn't bring trouble here, Emma. Trouble came looking for you. I'm only making sure it doesn't find you again." Her breath trembled. "But it has found me. Luke. He's one of them, and he's been here all along." Elias' jaw flexed. A snake can hide in tall grass for a while, but it can't hide forever. Silence fell again, not cold, not empty, but thoughtful, two people sharing the weight of the same unspoken fear. After a moment, Emma whispered, "Do you think he's still nearby?" Elias didn't sugarcoat. Men like Luke don't walk away until they're told they're done, and Rollins wouldn't say that yet. A chill pulled up Emma's spine. "So he's watching." "Probably," Elias said quietly. "But watching ain't the same as winning." Emma looked into the fire again. Her heart tugged painfully. "I feel foolish. I thought I could start breathing again here." "You can," Elias said. "You are." Emma wanted to believe him, needed to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her like a restless animal. What if she put this house in danger? What if she brought ruin to people who had shown her nothing but kindness? What if her presence lit a fuse that would burn this ranch to the ground? Her breath faltered. Elias saw it immediately. "Emma," he said softly, "look at me." She lifted her eyes to his. "You didn't choose any of this," he said, "but you're choosing to live. That matters. That's brave." Tears prickled her eyes, frustrating, unwelcome, but honest. "I don't feel brave," she whispered. "Most brave people don't," Elias replied. "Courage ain't loud. Sometimes it's just waking up again tomorrow." Her throat tightened. "I'm scared. I know," he said quietly. "I am too." Those words, simple, steady, humble, struck something deep inside her. He wasn't pretending to be invincible. He wasn't trying to carry all the weight alone. He offered solidarity instead of false strength. And somehow, that made him stronger. Before she could reply, Henry's hurried footsteps thundered through the hallway. "Boss," he whispered sharply, "out back. The horses are restless. Duke's acting like there's someone in the tree line." Elias stood immediately, shoulders tightening, inside or outside the fence. "Outside," Henry said, but close enough that Duke spooked. Elias grabbed his coat. "Stay inside," he told Emma firmly. "Both of you." Martha appeared from her room, tying her shawl around her shoulders. "Lord have mercy. Is it him?" "Probably," Henry said. Emma felt her stomach drop. The room spun for a moment. Elias touched the back of her chair lightly, a silent reassurance. "I won't be far." He stepped outside with Henry. Cold wind rushed in, swirling snow across the threshold before the door closed. Emma felt her breath lock in her chest. Martha came to her side, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Come away from the door. Dear." Emma let Martha lead her back toward the fireplace, But her heart was no longer with the fire. It was with the sound outside, boots crunching over frost, horses shifting, the low murmur of male voices preparing for whatever might be waiting beyond the dark. Minutes crept by, too slowly. The fire crackled. Martha's knitting needles clicked. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. Then distant footsteps. A sharp neigh from Duke. A muffled shout. Emma's breath hitched. Martha grabbed her hand. "Stay right here." But Emma couldn't. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She reached the window nearest the barn and peeked through the frost-covered glass. What she saw made her blood ice cold. Elias and Henry stood near the corral, lanterns held high. Beyond them, at the edge of the pines, the snow was disturbed in a clear, deliberate circle, as though someone had stood there for a long time, watching, waiting, listening. Henry pointed at the ground. Tracks. Fresh ones. Elias crouched beside the tracks. The lantern cast his shadow long across the snow, merging with the darkness under the trees. "Boots," he said. "One man, heavy. Probably Luke." Emma's heart hammered painfully. Martha whispered behind her, "What does he want?" Everything inside Emma answered the question. To finish what they started. To silence her. To keep Rollins safe from truth. The barn door creaked. Henry swung it open wider. "Boss, look!" Emma pressed her hand against the cold glass. The horses were jittery, but not just from fear. Something else was wrong. The hay was tossed wildly. A saddle thrown on the floor. A bridle cut clean through. Elias entered the barn. His voice hardened. He was inside. Emma's breath stilled. Inside. Inside the barn. Inside the place she had fed the hens just this morning. Inside the place she had begun to feel safe. A tremor ran through her entire body. Elias returned to the yard. He's probing the edges, testing us, seeing how close he can get. Henry scowled. "We ought to go after him." "No," Elias said firmly. "That's exactly what he wants." Emma watched him from the window, steady, calm, strong in a way that didn't shout but filled the whole night. The cold wind blew his coat back. His breath came out in pale clouds. He scanned the tree line again before nodding toward the house. When he finally stepped through the door, Emma felt her lungs release a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Elias shut the door behind him and hung his hat on the hook. "He's close," he said, "but not stupid enough to come through the front." Emma's voice shook. "He was inside the barn." Elias met her eyes. "Yes." "Why?" she whispered. "To see how aware we are," Elias said. "To see how scared we are, and to see if he could get near the house without being noticed." Her hands trembled. She tucked them under the quilt. "Elias," she whispered, "I'm endangering everyone here." "No," he said firmly. "Luke's making his own choices. His sin ain't yours to carry. But if Rollins ordered him, then Rollins will face his own reckoning. And so will Luke." Emma's throat tightened. She forced the words out anyway. "You could let me go." Elias stepped closer, not enough to crowd her, but enough to make sure she heard every word. "No," he said softly, but with unbreakable resolve. "I won't." She swallowed. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Elias said. "I know you deserve better than the hell they put you through. And I know you're not leaving this ranch unless it's your choice, not out of fear." Her breath trembled. "But I'm terrified." "Then we face that fear together," Elias said. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Why do you care so much?" Elias looked at her with a depth that made the world go still. "Because you remind me what it means to fight for someone again." For a moment, something passed between them, quiet, tender, unspoken. Then Henry spoke from the doorway. Boss, we'll keep watching shifts. Elias nodded. Wake me in 2 hours. Emma looked at him. You're not sleeping, I will, he said, but not until I know you're settled. Her voice quivered. Elias, I'm scared he'll come back. He will, Ely said honestly, but so will morning. His words weren't poetry. They weren't false comfort. They were truth offered like a warm coat in a freezing storm. And somehow, that was enough for tonight. Emma let Martha lead her toward her room. She paused once to look back. Elias stood at the window, watching the tree-lined shoulders broad, posture steady, silhouette framed by the glow of the fire. A guardian in the quiet, a wall against the dark, a man who refused to abandon her to fear. For the first time since the ridge, Emma didn't face the night alone. The next morning rose slow and pale, as if the sun itself hesitated to cross the horizon. The valley was quiet, too quiet for spring. Even the birds seemed wary, their songs muted as though the cold had stolen their courage. Emma Carter stood on the back porch wrapped in a thick wool shawl Martha had insisted she wear. Her fingers tightened around the railing, knuckles white. The night had left a shadow inside her, a feeling like a hand gripping her heart. She'd barely slept, waking at every sound, imagining Luke Harrison's boots crunching through the frost. But what unsettled her most wasn't fear. It was something she could hardly name. The way Elias Morgan had stood guard at the window long after the house went still. The quiet strength in his voice when he told her she wasn't leaving. The warmth that had flickered through her when he said she reminded him what it meant to fight for someone. She wasn't used to anyone fighting for her. She wasn't used to feeling seen. Emma pressed her palm to her chest, startled by how tender her heart felt. Don't be foolish, she whispered to herself. Don't mistake safety for something more. But even as she warned herself, she felt the truth stirring. Safety wasn't what made her hands tremble. Elias was behind her. The door opened with a soft creak. She didn't have to turn. She knew his footsteps now. Elias stepped beside her. Not too close, just where she could sense his presence like a steady warmth against the cold morning air. You didn't sleep, he said quietly. Neither did you. She wanted to say, but the words stayed caught in her throat. I rested some. She answered, Enough. He studied her in silence for a moment. You don't have to pretend with me. Emma let out a slow breath. I'm not used to being cared for. Elias's jaw softened. You ought to be. Those 4 words were quiet, but they hit her harder than any sermon from the settlement ever had. She swallowed. I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything with it, he said. Just let it be true. Emma turned her gaze back to the fields. The men were already working. Henry carrying saddle blankets, 2 ranch hands repairing the barn door Luke had forced open, Duke pacing restlessly in the corral like a sentinel who'd failed his post. The ranch was alive again, but tension lingered like mist over the grass. Do you think he'll return? Emma asked. Elias didn't lie. Yes. Her breath trembled. I hate living like this. He nodded slowly. I know the feeling. She glanced at him. You do. I've lost people, too, he said, voice steady but low. Different circumstances. Same hollow in the chest. Emma felt something twist inside her recognition. Empathy. Something warmer, too. What did you do? She asked softly. Elias looked out over his land, his eyes far away. I kept moving, kept working, pretended that was healing. His throat worked. Turns out, healing is quieter than work. Comes slower, too. Emma understood more than she wished she did. Before she could reply, Henry jogged up the path. Boss, he called. "We found something in the barn you need to see." Elias' shoulders stiffened. "Stay here," he told Emma gently. She caught his sleeve without thinking. "No, not this time. I'm coming." Elias hesitated, but only for a second. Then he nodded and walked with her toward the barn. Inside, sunlight slipped through the cracks in the roof, dust swirling in thin golden beams. The horses shifted uneasily as the three approached the back stall. Henry pointed at the floor. Something small lay half hidden in the straw. Elias crouched first, pushing hay aside with careful fingers. Emma froze. It was a nail, a simple iron nail, bent at one end, but not randomly. A symbol was scratched into the wood beneath it, a circle with a cross cut through the center. Emma's heart stopped. Luke's mark. The same one carved onto the settlers' meeting posts. The same one left at the foot of her cabin the night they took her. Her breathing turned thin and sharp. "He's leaving messages now," Henry muttered. "Warnings," Elias corrected softly. Emma pressed a hand to her mouth, nausea rising like a tide. Elias rose slowly and stepped toward her. She was shaking more than she wanted him to see. "Emma," he whispered. She forced words out. Why would he leave this? Why not just finish it?" "Because he wants you afraid first," Elias said. "That's how Rollins trained them." A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. Elias reached out slow, gentle, and brushed it away with his thumb. "You've faced worse than him," he murmured. "You'll face this too." Emma wanted to believe him. She really did. But something inside her cracked. "I can't keep bringing danger to you, to Henry, to Martha." "You're not bringing anything," Elias said firmly. "Luke chooses this, not you. But it's because of me," she whispered. "And you're worth fighting for," Elias said. Emma's breath caught. Her eyes lifted to his. For a moment, neither moved. Then Henry cleared his throat loudly and stepped back, pretending to check a saddle. It gave them privacy without leaving the barn. Elias lowered his voice. "Emma, listen to me." But before he could finish, a rider approached fast from the west trail. Hoofbeats thundered. Dust rose behind the horse like a warning cloud. Henry cursed. "What now?" The rider reined in sharply outside the barn. Elias stepped forward, hand on his revolver. Emma followed close, fear curling in her stomach. The rider swung down breathless, dust-covered, barely holding himself steady. It was Sheriff Briggs. Blood stained his sleeve. His hat was dented. His face was pale. "Briggs," Elias said sharply, catching his elbow. "What happened?" The sheriff swayed. He came after me." Emma's breath froze. Luke Briggs nodded, grimacing in pain. "He's not alone. Rollins sent men from the settlement. They're riding toward your ranch." Elias stiffened. "How many? Half a dozen," Briggs said. "The others stayed behind. But these men, these are the ones who do the dirty work. Luke's leading them." Emma felt her legs weaken. "He's coming here," she whispered. Briggs looked at her, not with pity, but with hardened truth. "He means to finish what he started." Silence fell, heavy, suffocating. Elias finally spoke. "Henry, sound the bell." Henry sprinted toward the main yard, shouting orders. The ranch burst into motion, men grabbing rifles, securing gates, ushering animals into safer pens. Emma stood frozen in place, her whole body trembling. Elias stepped in front of her. "Emma, look at me." She forced her eyes up. "You're safe," he said quietly but firmly. "I won't let them near you." Tears filled her eyes. "You can't promise that." "I just did." Her breath broke. "I'm terrified. So am I." Elias said. "But that doesn't change. What has to be done?" Emma's voice cracked. "I don't want people hurt because of me." "This isn't on you," Elias repeated. "Rollins carved this hate into his men long before you ran. You didn't make them who they are." Emma swallowed hard. "But I survived. And that's why they're coming." Elias' voice softened. "And that's why you're worth defending." A tear slipped down her cheek. Elias reached, intending to brush it away again, but Emma stepped closer before he could. She pressed her forehead lightly against his chest, breath shaking. She didn't even realize she'd moved until she felt his arms circle around her. He froze for a moment, surprised. Then he held her, carefully, reverently, as though she were something precious he'd been entrusted with. She whispered into his shirt, "I don't know how to be this close to someone. I don't know how to feel all of this. I don't know what any of it means." Elias lowered his chin, his breath warm against her hair. "It means you're alive, and that's enough." Emma clung to the fabric of his coat, just for a moment, just long enough for her heart to steady. Then another voice cut sharply across the yard. "Boss, Henry again. Urgent, breathless." Elias pulled back slightly, hands still on her arms until she found her balance. Emma turned. Henry was running toward them, face ashen. "They're here," he said, "just beyond the ridge." Emma's pulse thundered. Henry swallowed hard. "And Elias, Luke's got something with him." "What?" Elias asked. Henry hesitated, choking on his words. "A woman." Emma's heart stopped. Elias stiffened. "A woman." Henry nodded. "She's hurt. Badly. Looked like they dragged her." Emma felt her knees weaken. A woman. Another victim. Another life torn apart because of the settlement. Fear twisted into something sharper. Anger, grief, recognition. "They're using her," Emma whispered. "They're using her to get to me." Elias' expression hardened like stone. Then they just made their biggest mistake. Emma trembled. "Who is she?" Henry swallowed. "She kept calling your name." Emma's world tilted. Everything inside her went cold. Elias reached for her arm, steadying her. "Emma," he said gently. "Do you know her?" Emma's breath broke. "Yes," she whispered. Elias waited. Emma's voice dropped to barely a sound. "She's my sister." For a long moment, the world around Emma Carter seemed to fall away. Barn, fences, voices, even the cold wind cutting across the yard. Everything narrowed to one impossible sentence. "She's my sister." The words tasted unreal on her tongue, as if spoken by someone else. She hadn't allowed herself to even think of her sister for months, not since the settlement leaders tore them apart. Not since Rollins declared Leah unfit and sent her to the outer dwellings where the sick and the difficult were kept out of sight. Emma had feared the worst, had grieved without a grave, but now Leah was alive. And she was here, somewhere on the other side of the ridge, hurt, dragged, used as bait. Emma felt her breath collapse inside her chest. The porch railing steadied her as the ground threatened to tilt again. Elias Morgan stepped closer, not crowding, but anchoring her with quiet presence. "Emma," he said softly, "look at me." She tried, but her eyes kept drifting toward the tree line as if expecting her sister's silhouette to appear. "Emma," Elias repeated gently, cupping her elbow. This time, she forced her gaze to meet his. Shock, grief, terror, hope, all tangled in her expression. He didn't flinch away, just absorbed it, held it for her, gave her space to breathe through it. "We'll get her," Elias said. "I promise." Emma swallowed hard. "You don't even know if she's alive." "I know you," Elias answered. "And I know you wouldn't feel this much if she were gone." A tremor ran through her fear, mixed with fragile belief. She wanted to cling to his words, to believe there was still time, but dread curled tight around her ribs. "What if this is my fault?" she whispered. "If they hurt her, trying to hurt me, Emma?" Elias didn't raise his voice, but his tone carried enough weight to stop the spiral. "You didn't do this. Rollins did. Luke did. Evil men making evil choices." Her breath shivered out. "I can't lose her. Not her. Not again." "You won't," Elias said, but under his steady voice, she heard another truth. He wasn't certain. He was preparing for whatever he might find. And so was she. Henry rushed back across the yard, breathless and pale. "Boss, they've stopped by the North Ridge, about half a mile out, like they're waiting for us." Elias narrowed his eyes. "He wants a meeting." Henry nodded. "Or a trap. Probably both," Elias said. Emma stepped forward, voice raw. "Take me with you." Elias turned sharply. "No, I have to go," she insisted. "If Leah's there, if she's hurt, they'll kill her if I don't show myself." "They might kill you either way," Elias replied. "And that's exactly what Luke wants." Emma's voice cracked. "Elias, she's my sister." His expression softened painfully, but his stance stayed firm. "And you're the only one Rollins truly wants back. That gives us leverage. We use that carefully." Emma shook her head. "You don't understand." But he did. His eyes said so. "Emma," he murmured, "I know what family means." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "When my brother died 10 years ago, I would have given anything to have one more chance to save him. So I understand better than you think." Emma's breath faltered. Elias's eyes held hers steady, vulnerable, honest. But sometimes rushing in blind costs more lives, not fewer. We do this smart. Emma's shoulders slumped in anguish. "What does smart even mean against men like them?" "It means controlling what they think they control," Elias said. Henry scratched his head nervously. "Boss, you're not thinking of going alone, are you?" Elias shook his head. "No, but I'm going first, to see what they want, to see what shape Leah's in." Emma's heart clenched. "What if they shoot you on sight?" "They won't," Elias said. "Luke's a snake, not a fool. If he wanted me dead outright, he'd have shot me in the barn last night," Henry muttered, comforting. Emma stepped closer, voice trembling but determined. "You'll take me, or I'll follow you on foot if I have to." Elias stared at her long enough for Henry to shift uncomfortably. Finally, Elias exhaled, "No arguing with you." "Then you'll take me." "I'll take you as far as the clearing," he said. "But the moment I tell you to stay back, you stay. You hear me?" Emma placed a hand on his forearm, steady but pleading. "If Leah's bleeding, or cold, or frightened, Elias, I can't let her see strangers first. She'll think it's another punishment. She'll think she's being taken again." That truth hit him like a blow. Elias closed his eyes for a heartbeat, jaw tightening. "All right," he said quietly. "You talk to her first if we're close enough. But you stay behind me, no matter what." Emma nodded. "I will." He searched her face, needing to believe her. After a long moment, he said, "Get your coat. It's a long walk on cold ground." She hurried inside. Martha was waiting just beyond the door, wringing her hands. "Is it true?" Martha whispered. "Is it really Leah?" Emma's throat tightened. "Yes. Oh, child." Martha pulled Emma into her arms, squeezing tightly. "You be careful. You hear? Bring your sister home. Both of you." Emma nodded, tears burning her eyes. She grabbed her wool coat, wrapped a scarf around her neck, tucked trembling hands into gloves. Before she left the room, she paused, looking at the walls, the hearth, the safety she'd found here. "Please," she prayed silently, "let me bring her back to this." When she returned outside, Elias already had Duke saddled, and Henry had another horse ready for her. "You sure she can ride?" Henry asked. Elias glanced at Emma. "She can." Emma mounted slowly, muscles tight with fear and tension. Elias swung onto Duke with practiced ease, then guided them toward the north ridge. The air grew colder as they rode. Wind pressed at their coats. Branches clawed gently at their sleeves. Snow crunched beneath hooves, a slow, rhythmic sound that made Emma's nerves jump with every beat. Elias kept his horse close enough that their knees almost brushed. Finally, after what felt like miles, they reached the clearing. Emma froze so sharply that her horse tossed its head. Leah was there. Her sister lay on her side near a fallen log, hands bound, hair tangled, face bruised in dark blotches. Her dress was torn, one sleeve ripped entirely. A smear of dried blood darkened the snow near her shoulder. "Leah." Emma breathed, voice breaking. But she didn't run, didn't bolt toward her. She couldn't, because on the opposite side of the clearing, half shrouded by the shadows of tall pines, stood Luke Harrison and 5 settlement riders behind him. Luke stepped forward, smirking, adjusting his gloves as though this were a routine visit between friends. "Emma," he drawled. "Pastor Rollins sends his regards." Elias moved his horse slightly in front of hers, shielding her. Emma's pulse thrashed in her throat. Leah stirred weakly at the sound. "Emma." The single word was a knife through Emma's heart. She tried to move around Elias, but he placed a gentle hand on her knee, grounding her. "Easy," he murmured. "Let me talk first." Luke laughed. "Now isn't that sweet? Rancher thinks he can protect what ain't his." Emma glared at him. "Leah has nothing to do with your orders. She's innocent." Luke shrugged casually. "Maybe, but she's yours. And you didn't come back when you were told." Emma's stomach twisted. "Told you tried to kill me." Luke lifted one eyebrow. "Rollins calls it correction." Elias's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "Where I come from, we call it attempted murder." Luke ignored him, focusing solely on Emma. "You know the rules. Emma, women who wander don't stay blessed long. Pastor Rollins wants you back. Says you got poison in you. Says only he can cleanse it." Emma felt bile rise in her throat. She forced the words out. "I will never return." Luke sighed dramatically. "Pastor figured you'd say that. That's why he gave us Leah. Said you'd come running if we hurt her." Emma's grief turned to fire. "You monster! Now, Luke chided. "Let's not get emotional. I didn't kill her. Rollins wants her alive. For now." A sickening silence followed. Elias nudged his horse forward. "What do you want?" Luke smiled coldly. "A trade." Elias's jaw hardened. "No." But Emma already knew what Luke would say. "You come with us," Luke said, pointing straight at her, "and the girl lives long enough for the pastor to decide her fate." Emma's breath caught. "This isn't a negotiation," Luke continued. "You get on your horse and ride back with us, and your sister don't get buried in this snow." A pulse of terror exploded through Emma's body so violently she nearly swayed in her saddle. Elias' voice was low, controlled, deadly. "You lay a hand on her and save your threats." Luke sneered. "You got one choice. Emma returns with us. Today. Or we finish what should have been finished on that ridge." Emma felt the world tilt. She couldn't lose Leah. "Not again. Not like this," she whispered, almost to herself. "Elias, I have to go." "No." Elias said sharply. It's the only way to save her. There's another way, he insisted. You're not walking into their hands. She'll die if I don't. She'll die if you do, Elias countered. And so will you. Emma's breath trembled. Then tell me what to do. Elias didn't answer immediately. He looked at Leah broken, shivering, barely conscious. He looked at Luke smirking with sick confidence. He looked at Emma, heart torn open, begging for her sister's life. And something inside, Elias Morgan shifted. A decision made itself in him, a choice he never intended to speak aloud. He whispered, Emma, trust me. She stared at him, uncertain, and yet, in some deep place, she did. Elias turned his horse toward Luke and said words that made Emma freeze. I'll go. Emma gasped. Elias, no. But Elias kept his gaze locked on Luke. You want someone. Take me. Luke blinked, confused. You. The pastor don't want you, but he wants to break Emma, Elias said. And watching me walk into your hands for her, that'll break her far worse than surrendering. Emma's heart stopped. Elias continued, voice calm, steady, devastating. Let Emma and Leah go. I'll ride back with you. No fight. Luke studied him. Then his smile curved slow and cruel. Well now, he murmured, a man willing to bleed for a woman. Pastor might find some use for you after all. Emma shook her head violently. Elias, stop. You can't. He looked back at her. Really looked. And in his eyes there was truth, and something dangerously close to love. Emma, he said softly, some things are worth giving yourself for. Her voice cracked. Not like this. His silence said otherwise. Luke held out a hand. Deal. Elias nodded once. Emma reached for him, voice breaking. Elias, don't do this. I need you. Elias's breath hitched. It was the first time she'd ever said those words. Luke laughed. Sweet. This'll be fun to watch. As Elias nudged Duke forward to surrender himself, Emma realized something with devastating clarity. She wasn't just afraid of losing Leah anymore. She was terrified of losing him. For a heartbeat, time held its breath in the clearing. Snow drifted lazily through the cold air. Branches groaned softly above. 6 riders sat motionless in the shadows. And in the center of it all, Elias Morgan nudged Duke forward, offering himself. Emma Carter felt the world tilt so violently she thought she might fall from her saddle. Her hand shot out instinctively, grasping Elias's sleeve before he moved too far. Don't, she whispered, pleading, trembling. He turned his head toward her. The sadness in his eyes nearly undid her. It's all right, he murmured. I know what I'm doing. You're giving them your life. No. His voice was gentle but firm. I'm buying yours. And Leah's. Emma shook her head, tears burning hot in the cold. I don't want your sacrifice. I never asked. You didn't have to ask. Her breath broke. Luke Harrison watched the exchange with sick delight. From the way he leaned casually against his saddle horn, he looked almost entertained. Well now, Luke drawled. I didn't expect a love story this early in the day. Emma stiffened. Shut your mouth. Luke grinned wider. Temper, temper. Pastor Rollins always said a woman with fire in her is a woman that needs discipline. Elias's jaw tightened so sharply Emma saw the muscle jump. But he didn't look at Luke. He kept his eyes on Emma, anchoring her, keeping her from toppling into despair. Emma, Elias said softly, listen to me. You have to stay focused. Leah needs you. Emma's gaze flicked to her sister still lying in the snow, shaking, lips blue. She could barely lift her head. Emma, Leah whispered weakly, don't. Let them. I won't. Emma choked. I won't let them touch you again. But how? How? When the men who broke their lives were now asking for another sacrifice, Emma gripped Elias's coat tighter, as if she could anchor him physically, keep him from walking willingly into danger. Elias, please. His expression softened painfully. I'm not dying today. Emma, I'm not giving up. I'm just stepping forward first, so you don't have to. Her chest felt like it was collapsing. Luke finally pushed his horse forward, his patience thinning. Enough chatter. Morgan, come here. Now. Elias gently pried Emma's fingers off his sleeve slow enough that her hands could feel the warmth of him one last time. Trust me, he said. She didn't trust the world. She didn't trust fate. She barely trusted hope. But she trusted him. Elias? He gave her a small, quiet smile. I'm not leaving you. I'm just moving toward the problem. He then nudged Duke forward, leaving Emma feeling as though someone had scooped out her chest and left nothing but air and fear. Henry moved his horse closer to Emma, sensing she might fall apart. But he didn't speak. He knew better than to interrupt grief that was still forming its shape. Luke watched Elias approach with cruel satisfaction. Well, well, Luke said. Didn't think a rancher like you had it in you. Elias reined in Duke just short of Luke's horse. You want me? Here I am. Let the women go. Luke smirked. Women actually? I only see one of them worth trading for. His gaze slid to Emma. Elias's voice hardened. You lay one hand on her. Luke raised both palms mockingly. Easy, cowboy. I didn't say I'd hurt her. Pastor wants her alive. Just obedient. Something darkened in Elias's eyes, a storm gathering strength. Luke nodded at two riders behind him. Get Morgan off that horse. The riders dismounted, rifles drawn. Elias didn't flinch. He didn't resist. He simply slid off Duke with quiet dignity, boots hitting the snow in a solid, grounded thud. Emma's heart lodged in her throat. Luke dismounted too, stepping closer. Turn around. Elias didn't move. Luke scowled. Turn around. Elias looked at him steady, fearless. If you intend to bind my hands, do it while I'm facing you. Cowards tie people's backs. Men tie their fronts. Luke bristled. One of the riders whispered, Boss, Pastor said I know what he said. Luke snapped. Elias stood still, shoulders squared, powerful, composed, unbroken. Luke stepped closer, glaring up at him. You think you're better than us? Elias didn't answer, and that silence calm, steady, unimpressed, infuriated Luke. He swung, a fist, hard and fast. It hit Elias's jaw with a crack loud enough to echo through the clearing. Emma gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Elias staggered half a step, but didn't fall, didn't crumble. He straightened slowly, wiping a thin trickle of blood from his lip, and looked at Luke with quiet pity. That expression enraged Luke more than any insult could. You want to see, broken? Luke snarled. I'll show you, broken. He raised his hand to strike again, and Emma's voice cut the air like a whip. Stop. Her horse lurched forward before she could think. Henry reached to grab her reins, but she slipped out of his grasp and rode straight toward them. Luke spun, scowling. Well, look who decided to join the show. Emma dismounted so fast she stumbled, snow spraying around her boots. She moved between Luke and Elias, breath shaking but eyes blazing. You don't touch him again, she said. Luke laughed. Or what, you'll pray me away. Emma didn't back down. I'm not the one who should be afraid. He is. She pointed at Elias. He's the one you fear, because he can stand tall without hurting others. You break people to feel strong. He protects them to feel whole. Luke's jaw tightened. Emma pressed on, voice fierce, though her hands shook. You're nothing but a frightened boy hiding behind scripture you don't understand. Elias whispered sharply. Emma. But the words were out. The truth had escaped her lips like a spark meeting dry brush. Luke's smile vanished. His face twisted. You shouldn't have said that. Emma stepped backward instinctively, straight into Elias. His hands caught her shoulders. Emma, get behind me, he murmured. No, she whispered. Not this time. Luke raised the butt of his rifle. He wasn't striking Elias. He was aiming for her. Elias moved a blur of motion, a protective instinct older than fear. He pulled Emma behind him just as the rifle cracked across his shoulder. The blow dropped him to one knee. Emma cried out, falling with him, arms around him instinctively. Elias, she choked. He gritted his teeth, breath stolen by pain. But he forced himself upright, leaning into her for only a moment before steadying himself. Luke lowered the rifle. That's lesson 1. Don't speak out of turn. Elias's glare could have broken stone. You hit her, he rasped. I hit you, Luke corrected. You aim for her. Luke shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. Elias surged to his feet, despite the pain anger rolling off him like thunder. Luke raised the rifle again, but then a small, hoarse voice cut through the frozen air. Stop! Everyone turned. Leah Carter was pushing herself up on trembling elbows. Her face was pale, bruised, streaked with blood. But her eyes, those soft gray eyes Emma remembered from childhood, were blazing with something that had survived every cruelty. Leave my sister alone, Leah choked. Emma gasped. Leah, no, stay down. But Leah forced herself higher. Emma didn't do anything wrong. Leah rasped. It was me. I'm the one who told her to run. I'm the one who tried to leave the settlement first. If Pastor Rollins wants someone punished, take me. Emma's knees nearly buckled. No, Emma whispered, voice shattering. No, Leah, please don't. Luke's expression turned predatory. Well now, isn't this interesting? Elias hissed. Emma, get to her. Emma ran, slipping through snow, heart in her throat. She reached Leah and fell to her knees, pulling her sister into her arms. Leah collapsed against her, sobbing quietly. Emma pressed her forehead to Leah's hair. Don't ever say that again. Don't you ever offer yourself for me, Leah whispered. I couldn't let him hurt you. Emma held her tighter. We protect each other. Always. Luke lowered his rifle, annoyed. This is getting boring. Morgan, enough delays. You're coming with us now. Elias stepped forward, pain flashing through his eyes, but resolve burning stronger. He opened his mouth to answer, but before he could, a rifle cocked sharply behind them. Henry. His voice was steady, cold. Boss ain't going nowhere. Behind Henry. 3 more Morgan ranch hands emerged from the trees, rifles up, boots planted firm. Luke stiffened. Suddenly, the numbers weren't on his side. The clearing shifted power, tilting silently in a new direction. Elias' voice broke the tense quiet. Luke, he said, this ends now. Walk away while you still can. Luke's jaw twitched. His men shifted nervously. One whispered, Boss, maybe he's right. Luke glared at him. Shut up. But his confidence was cracking. Emma rose slowly, helping Leah sit upright. She stepped beside Elias, not behind him. Beside him. And when she spoke, her voice carried something new. Strength. Certainty. Truth. You won't take him, she said. You won't take me, and you won't take my sister ever again. Luke's jaw clenched so hard Emma heard his teeth grind. He flicked his reins sharply, fury in every movement. "This ain't over," he growled. Elias answered calmly, "It is for today." Luke glared at both of them, Elias with hate, Emma with something darker and unhinged. Then he jerked his horse around, signaling his men. One by one, the riders retreated into the trees. And just like that, Luke Harrison vanished into the pines. Emma didn't breathe until they were gone. Her legs nearly buckled, but Elias caught her in his good arm. "We're all right," he whispered. But Emma didn't feel all right. She felt shaken open, cracked wide, and overwhelmed by something she didn't want to name yet. "Elias," she whispered, "you were willing to die." He looked at her, really looked, and the confession slipped from him before he could stop it. "For you, yes." Emma's heart stopped twisting, opening, aching, breaking all at once. The ride back to the Morgan ranch was agonizingly slow. Snow crunched beneath hooves. Wind whispered through the still pines. Leah Carter trembled in Emma's arms with every sway of the horse, her body weak and half-conscious, but alive in a way Emma had once prayed for and then abandoned hope of. Elias Morgan rode on Emma's other side, his posture rigid, one hand held tight against the bruise spreading across his ribs. The blow from Luke's rifle had cracked something inside him, not enough to break him, but enough to make every breath sharp. Emma watched him closely. Fear and gratitude tangled painfully in her chest. He had been willing to give himself up, willing to bleed for her, willing to walk into darkness just to pull her back toward light. The weight of that truth pressed on her heart with every hoofbeat. Behind them, Henry and 2 ranch hands kept watch, scanning the trees for any sign of riders returning. But the forest remained silent, holding its breath as if unwilling to disturb the fragile moment. When they finally reached the ranch house, Martha Walton burst out the door, apron still tied around her waist, hands flying to her mouth. "Lord, have mercy," she whispered. "Bring her in." Quickly Emma and Elias dismounted. Emma leaned into him just long enough to steady Leah between them. Elias ignored the pain in his side and lifted Leah into his arms as though she weighed nothing. "Inside." Martha and Henry cleared a space near the fire, spreading blankets and fetching water already simmering on the stove. Emma knelt beside her sister, stroking her hair, whispering, "You're home now. Leah, you're safe." Leah blinked weakly, her voice barely a breath. "Emma, you came." Tears slipped down Emma's cheeks. "I never stopped trying to find you. Never." Elias crouched beside them, reaching to examine the bruising on Leah's arms. "These aren't from the cold," he muttered quietly. Emma swallowed hard. "No." Martha pressed a damp cloth to Leah's forehead, her voice soft but trembling. "How could anyone do this to a girl so gentle?" Emma closed her eyes. Rollins taught them that pain was purification, that breaking the weak made the community stronger. Elias stilled. A slow, cold anger settled beneath his ribs. No one deserved that. No one. And Leah Frail, soft-spoken Leah, was perhaps the least deserving soul alive. Emma gently brushed dirt from Leah's cheek. "We'll take care of you now. No more harm." Leah's eyes fluttered. "Emma, you shouldn't have come. They wanted you." Emma shook her head firmly. "I won't abandon you again." Leah tried to smile small, fragile, heartbreaking. "You didn't abandon me. You trusted I'd find a way through." Emma pressed Leah's hand to her chest, right over her heart. "I nearly lost hope." "But you didn't," Leah whispered. "That's what matters." Elias looked away, jaw tightening. He recognized the truth in Leah's words. He'd seen it in Emma from the moment he found her on the ridge. A woman who had every reason to break, but didn't. When Martha stepped away to fetch clean bandages, Elias stood carefully and motioned for Emma to follow him a few steps back. She rose reluctantly, keeping one eye on Leah. Elias leaned against the wall, one hand pressed to his injured side. The lamplight cast warm shadows across his face, softening the hardened angles. "You need rest," Emma said quietly. "Your shoulder hurts like hell," he admitted without pride. "But I've had worse." Emma frowned deeply. "Elias, don't pretend you're all right. You almost—" Her voice caught. "You almost died today." He shook his head. "I wasn't planning to die." "You weren't planning," Emma whispered. "But you were ready." He didn't deny it. Silence settled between them thick, full of what she wanted to say and what he wasn't sure he should. The fire snapped softly behind them, throwing their shadows long across the floor. At last, Elias spoke, voice low and steady. "Emma, when I saw Leah, when I saw what they'd done, I understood how far Rollins is willing to go." His eyes darkened. "This won't end by hiding." Emma's breath trembled. "I know, but it also won't end with you handing yourself over," he continued. "You're not theirs to claim." Emma lowered her eyes. "Sometimes I still feel like I am. Like I'll always be that girl who believed every word they told me." "You're not," Elias said, and the quiet conviction in his voice made her lift her head again. "You walked away from them even when walking meant death. You stood up to Luke today. You protected Leah. That takes more courage than you give yourself credit for." Emma blinked quickly, eyes burning. Elias hesitated just slightly before adding in a softer tone, "It takes more courage than most men I know." For a moment, Emma forgot to breathe. Martha returned with more blankets, interrupting the stillness between them. Elias exhaled slowly, pulling himself upright. "You should sit," she murmured. "I'm fine," he said. Martha eyed him with the same stern disapproval she used on Henry when he pretended a bull hadn't kicked him. "You will sit, Elias Morgan, before you pass out and give me more work." Elias cracked a tired smile. "Yes, ma'am." Emma almost laughed through her tears. When Elias finally sat on the chair by the hearth, Emma knelt beside her sister again, brushing Leah's tangled hair gently behind her ear. Leah whispered, He protected you." Emma looked at Elias. His broad shoulders bent slightly with exhaustion, his eyes distant and tired, but watching her every movement. "Yes," Emma whispered. "He did." Leah's eyes softened. "Does he love you?" Emma froze. Elias looked away quickly, pretending he hadn't heard, but the slight flicker of tension in his jaw told her he had. I don't know," Emma replied honestly. "I don't know what any of this means yet." Leah attempted a soft smile. "I think you do." Emma looked down, throat tight. "Leah, I can't think about that now. Not with all this danger." "Sometimes danger is exactly when truth finds us," Leah whispered. Emma swallowed hard. "Maybe. But Elias nearly gave up his life today. I don't know how to carry that." Leah squeezed her hand weakly. "Then carry only what you can. The rest, leave for him." Emma glanced up again, and this time Elias wasn't looking away. He held her gaze, long enough that her breath trembled, long enough that she felt something shift again, something unmistakable. Martha broke the moment gently. "We need to keep Leah warm and awake. Emma, fetch another blanket. Henry, heat more water." Henry moved quickly. Emma stood and crossed the room. Elias rose too, slowly, one hand braced on the table. Emma turned to him. "You should lie down." "I will," he said. "When you do." She swallowed. "That might be a long time from now." He gave a faint smile. "Then I'll stay awake." Emma stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Elias, don't ever do what you did today again." "Which part?" he asked quietly. "Shielding you, trying to keep you alive, offering yourself in my place," she whispered fiercely. "That part." He inhaled deeply, eyes steady. "Emma, I'd rather bleed than watch them take you. That's not going to change." She felt tears rise again, hot, helpless, full. "Why?" she whispered. His voice softened. "Because some lives are worth more than your own. You taught me that." Emma's breath faltered. "Elias?" But he shook his head gently. "Not now. It's enough that you know." Before she could answer, Leah coughed sharply, and Emma rushed back to her side. The room fell into a heavy rhythm, caring, healing, waiting. Night deepened outside. The fire sank lower. The snow continued falling, silent and cold, and still. No one dared sleep. At some point, Sheriff Harlow Briggs arrived bandaged, pale, but stubborn enough to ride. He pushed through the door, shaking off the cold. "Heard what happened," he muttered. "We're posting patrols around the ranch until Rollins makes his next move." Elias nodded. "He will." Briggs exhaled sharply. "Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of." The sheriff approached Leah, removing his hat respectfully. "Miss Carter, I'll do everything in my power to make sure what happened to you never happens again." Leah blinked weakly. "Thank you, Sheriff." Briggs turned to Elias and Emma. "Rollins sent men. That means he's desperate. Desperate men get sloppy. That's when we strike." Emma felt a cold knot settle in her stomach. Strike how Briggs looked at her steadily. By bringing the law to his front door. Something no one's ever dared do. Elias nodded grimly. "Then we're not running anymore." Emma swallowed hard. "I'm tired of running." Briggs gave a grim smile. "Good, because this time you'll fight on your terms, not his." Silence fell again, thick as a blanket. Emma leaned against Leah, feeling her sister breathe, fragile but steady. Elias watched them both, his eyes softening despite the pain. Something inside him had shifted permanently. He wasn't just protecting them now. He was standing with them. Outside. The wind began to howl against the windows, a storm gathering its strength. Inside, 3 lives sat wrapped in the fragile quiet between battles. Emma lifted her head slightly, whispering to Leah, "You're not alone anymore." And Leah whispered back, "Neither are you." Dawn crept in slowly the next morning, gray and heavy as though the sky itself anticipated what was coming. Clouds rolled low across the valley, thickening by the hour. The wind tasted of a storm not yet born, but already restless. It rattled the windows of the Morgan ranch, slipped beneath the doors, and warned the living that nothing about this day would be gentle. Inside the house, a hush had settled fragile, stretched thin, the kind of quiet that comes only after fear has burned itself out and left exhausted embers behind. Emma Carter sat beside Leah on the long sofa near the hearth. The fire still glowed, though dimmer now, soft amber light brushing along Leah's pale face. Her sister slept lightly, breath still shallow, but steadier than the night before. Emma gently tucked the blanket higher around her shoulders. A protective tenderness welled in her chest, a mixture of grief, relief, and a fierce love she hadn't felt in years. It almost broke her. She brushed her fingers through Leah's hair. "You're safe now. I promise." Behind her, footsteps moved quietly across the wooden floor. Elias Morgan. He didn't speak right away. He rarely did in the early hours. He just stood near the table, One hand braced against the wood as though the bruise in his ribs still throbbed. Emma sensed him before she turned. She saw the way his shoulders carried both the weight of leadership and something softer, something personal, something for her. She rose carefully, not wanting to disturb Leah, and crossed the room to him. "You didn't sleep?" she murmured. Elias gave a faint, wry smile. "Neither did you." "I rested some. You watched the fire all night." Emma hesitated. "I was afraid she'd stop breathing." He shook his head gently. "She's stronger than you think. You both are." Emma felt a warmth blossom in her chest, dangerous, overwhelming, something she couldn't name without trembling. She looked away quickly. Outside, Henry Blake stormed through the yard, barking orders at the ranch hands who were setting up wooden barriers, checking rifles, and tying off horses that would be needed fast. Sheriff Harlow Briggs had returned before dawn, sore and unsteady, but stubborn enough to help direct the preparations. The ranch was becoming a fortress, a quiet fortress, a determined one, but a fortress nonetheless. Elias watched through the frosted window. "Briggs wants to move by noon." Emma felt a knot form in her stomach. Move where? To confront Rollins, to bring him in legally. Emma swallowed. "He won't come willingly." "No," Elias said. "He won't." Emma wrapped her arms around herself. The weight of what was coming pressed down on her chest until it hurt to breathe. She whispered, "Elias, what if we're not ready?" He looked at her carefully. "We are. You don't know that. I know you survived what they tried to do. I know Leah has a will to live even after everything. I know Briggs has half the town behind him now, outraged at what he learned." A pause. "And I know Rollins is panicking. That makes him sloppy." Emma shook her head. "It also makes him dangerous. Danger is something we face, not something we bow to," Elias said softly. Her throat tightened. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't," Elias replied, "but doing the right thing never is." Emma studied his face, the lines of hardship, the quiet suffering in his eyes, the gentleness beneath all that strength. She wondered how many burdens he carried that he never spoke of. "Why do you help me this much?" she whispered. Elias looked at her, a long, slow look that felt like it saw everything she hid and everything she feared. "Because I want to," he said. "Because you deserve better than the life they forced on you. Because Leah deserves a chance. Because there are people in this world you don't turn away from." He paused. "And you're one of them." Emma's breath trembled. She took a small step closer, not touching him, but near enough that she felt his warmth like a shield around her. Before she could speak, the front door opened sharply, wind sweeping in. Sheriff Briggs stamped his boots and shut the door behind him. His face was pinched, eyes heavy with worry. "Trouble?" Elias asked. "Not yet," Briggs said. "But word's spreading fast in town. Some folks are with us. Some are scared. And some still worship the ground Rollins walks on." Emma stiffened. Briggs nodded at her. "I spoke with your sister last night while she was half awake. She mentioned a few things, some names." Emma's face paled. "Names," Briggs sighed heavily. "People Rollins used. People he hurt. Families he tore apart under the guise of scripture." Emma closed her eyes. "I tried to warn them. I tried to gather proof. That's why they came for me." Briggs nodded slowly. "And it's time the town hears that proof." Emma snapped her eyes open. "You want me to testify?" "Yes." Elias inhaled. "Briggs." The sheriff held up a hand. "I know it's risky. But damn it, Elias, it's the only way. Rollins holds power because people don't know the truth. They've been fed lies, buried under fear. But if Emma speaks, if she lays out what she saw, what happened to Leah, what happened to Sam, people will listen. Emma felt her heart twist painfully. Sam. Her husband's name felt like a bruise pressed too soon. Briggs softened his voice. Emma, I need you to tell me everything. Everything Sam told you. Everything you recorded in that notebook. The townspeople need to see it. Emma took a step back, breath shaking. I can't relive it like that. Elias placed a steady hand on her shoulder. You don't have to do it alone. Emma looked at him, eyes wide with fear. Elias, I've spent months trying to bury those memories. The sickness, the deaths, the nights when Sam begged them to stop, and they laughed at him. They laughed. She pressed a hand to her chest, voice breaking. I can't open that wound again. Briggs stepped closer. I wish I could spare you. Emma, God knows I do. But unless the town hears from someone who lived it, who survived it, Rollins will rally his loyal men. He'll paint you as the traitor, and then he'll come here for you again. Emma turned her face away, tears burning hot. Leah stirred weakly on the sofa. In a small, raspy voice, she whispered, Emma, tell them. You have to. Emma rushed to her sister's side. Leah, you need rest. Leah shook her head weakly. They won't believe anyone else, but they'll believe you. You've always had the truth, even when it cost you everything. Emma brushed her fingers across Leah's forehead, torn in two. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Leah smiled faintly. You were strong enough to come back for me? You can do this too. Emma swallowed hard. If I speak, Rollins will come after us. Briggs stepped forward. He already is. Silence fell. Heavy. Suffocating. Unavoidable. Finally. Emma wiped her cheeks and nodded once, trembling but resolute. I'll testify, she whispered, for Leah, for Sam, for everyone they hurt. Briggs exhaled in relief. Good. We leave in an hour. Town Hall. Elias stiffened. I'm coming. Briggs nodded. Didn't expect anything less. Elias looked at Emma. I'll be at your side the whole time. Emma felt something inside her settle. Not relief, not peace. Something steadier, like a foundation she hadn't had in years. Thank you, she said softly. Elias gave a small nod. You don't face this storm alone? Emma walked back toward Leah, who had fallen asleep again, exhausted. She brushed a thumb across her sister's cheek. I'll protect you, she murmured, no matter what. As she stood, the wind rattled the windows again. The clouds darkened. The air grew colder. A storm was coming not just in the sky, but in town. And Emma Carter was walking straight into the heart of it. Elias met her at the door, their eyes locking with unspoken understanding. Whatever came next, the lies, the anger, the confrontation with Pastor Gideon Rollins, they would face it together. The wind had turned sharp by the time Elias Morgan saddled up the horses. Thin streams of dust whisked across the ranch yard, carried by the rising storm winds that felt more like a warning than weather. Clouds stacked heavy over the plains, bruised purple at the edges, moving low enough that it seemed the sky might brush the tops of the cottonwoods. Emma Carter stepped out onto the porch, shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. Though her trembling had nothing to do with the cold, she paused at the top step, drawing a shaky breath as she watched the ranch hands quietly preparing for the ride to town. They spoke little. Their movements were slow, deliberate men who understood danger well enough not to loud-talk it. Elias stepped toward her, holding her horse by the reins. "You ready?" he asked softly. "No," Emma whispered. "But I'm going." He gave a single approving nod, as if courage didn't need loud praise, only recognition. Sheriff Harlow Briggs joined them moments later, stiff with pain from his broken ribs, but wearing his badge as if it were armor forged of conviction. Another deputy, young Caleb Myers, rode up behind him. The boy looked scared, but resolute. Henry Blake met them at the gate with a somber expression. "We'll hold the ranch while you're gone. Nobody gets through." Elias clasped the foreman's shoulder. "Keep Leah safe." Henry nodded once. "With my life." Emma turned toward the house where Leah slept, the window curtains fluttering faintly with the draft. A tremor of fear rippled through her, fear of leaving her sister defenseless, fear of facing the town, fear of bringing old nightmares into daylight. Elias noticed. "You're thinking too loud again," he said gently, stepping closer. Emma blinked. "Thinking what?" "That you're alone in this." He shook his head. "You're not." Her breath unknotted slightly. Then Elias did something he hadn't done before he touched her cheek, just lightly, but enough that warmth flushed through her chest. "You speak the truth," he murmured, "and I'll stand beside you. That's the deal." Emma swallowed hard, voice catching. "I don't want anyone hurt because of me." Elias gave a wry half-smile. "Too late. Folks get hurt standing for what's right. What matters is that we stand." Briggs cleared his throat. "We should move." The four of them mounted their horses and set off toward town, leaving behind the ranch's safety and riding straight toward a storm, both the one brewing in the sky and the one waiting at the heart of Willow Creek. The ride was quiet at first. The land stretched out in an endless sheet of pale brown grass, the wind flattening the blades in long trembling waves. Prairie hawks circled overhead, wings stiff against the rising gusts as though holding their breath the same way Emma did. Halfway to town, Briggs slowed his horse and glanced over. "Folks will be gathered already. Rollins sent word this morning called a prayer meeting, but we all know what it really is." Emma felt cold seep under her skin. Rollins never did anything without purpose. Scripture-shaped threats were his favorite tools. "What if they don't listen?" she whispered. Briggs adjusted the brim of his hat. "Some won't, but some will. And that's all we need." Caleb, riding just behind them, added quietly, "People respect you, Miss Carter, even if they've been scared to show it." Emma stared ahead at the dirt road. They didn't respect Sam. They didn't save him. Caleb hesitated, but didn't look away. People make mistakes. Ugly ones. Sometimes they don't know they're part of a wrong thing until someone points it out. Elias spoke next, voice low. "Your voice might give them a chance to choose better." Emma didn't answer. Instead, she squeezed her reins tighter. She wasn't riding toward justice. She was riding toward her past. Toward the same church where she'd prayed for Sam's fever to break. Toward the same building where Rollins once shook her hand after burying her husband and whispered, "There's virtue in silence." Sister Carter. She'd believed him then. Not anymore. The town of Willow Creek came into view as the wind picked up, lifting dust swirls between the small shops and wood-frame houses. By the time they reached the main street, doors were already shut, windows curtained. People stood in clusters near the church, voices hushed, heads turning as the small riding party approached. Emma's stomach twisted so hard she nearly doubled over. Elias slid his horse close enough that their legs brushed. "Remember," he murmured, "truth ain't a weapon unless spoken out loud." She nodded, though her throat felt like sand. Briggs dismounted first and marched up the church steps, shoulders squared despite his limp. "Town meeting." All inside he called. A ripple of unease spread through the crowd. Pastor Gideon Rollins emerged from the church doorway then. his expression as polished as the gold cross hanging from his neck. His coat was immaculate, his hair combed back with practiced care. He greeted the crowd with a benevolent smile that made Emma's blood run cold. "Sheriff Briggs," Rollins said warmly, "I trust you received my summons for morning worship." Briggs snorted. "This isn't worship, and you know damn well why I'm here." Rollins turned his gaze toward Emma, slow, deliberate, predatory. A smile curved his lips. "Well," he purred, "if it isn't Sister Carter." Emma felt her spine shiver, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. Rollins dipped his head as though greeting royalty. "I understand you've returned to us. Blessed is the wanderer who finds her way back to the flock." "I'm not part of your flock," Emma said quietly. A murmur swept through the crowd. Rollins' eyes hardened for a flicker of a second, a crack in the holy mass before he smoothed his expression again. "My dear," he said, "you must be weary. Trauma can cloud the memory. You should rest before speaking. We wouldn't want your grief leading you into false recollections." Emma's breath hitched. He was doing it again, bending her truth, questioning her sanity, painting her as unsteady before she even had a chance to speak. Elias stepped forward, voice a low growl. "She remembers just fine." Rollins' eyes flicked to him, contempt sharp as a blade. The wealthy rancher who believes he can challenge divine order. "Divine order," Briggs barked. "You tried to kill her." Gasps broke through the crowd. Rollins spread his hands as if calming frightened children. "My friends, let us not leap to conclusions fueled by gossip. Sister Carter's distress is understandable. She is vulnerable, emotional. She has endured much." Emma's pulse roared in her ears. He wasn't denying it. He wasn't defending himself. He was undermining her. She stepped forward before anyone could stop her. "Tell them." "Pastor Rollins," she said, voice trembling but growing stronger with every word. "Tell them why Sam died arguing with you 2 days before he fell sick." A hush blanketed the crowd. Rollins kept smiling. "Now." "Sister, tell them," she interrupted, louder now, "about the ledger Leah found in your desk. The money you took from widows, the punishments you gave to families behind closed doors." Rollins' smile vanished. "You speak out of turn," he snapped. "Mask cracking." "Tell them," Emma said again, "how you blamed God for every cruel thing you did." Rollins swung toward the crowd, pointing at her. "She is deceived. This woman is the serpent's voice. She brings lies." Elias stepped beside Emma, a silent pillar of strength. "She's telling the truth," he said firmly, "and you know it." But Rollins wasn't looking at Elias. He was staring at Emma with pure hatred now. "You ungrateful, foolish girl," he hissed. "You think you can break what I built?" Emma felt her breath stop. The crowd began murmuring, shifting, confused, unsettled. Rollins realized too late that he'd shown his true face. Briggs raised his badge. "Gideon Rollins, you're under arrest for attempted murder, coercion, unlawful confinement, and financial fraud. Step forward." Rollins didn't move. His eyes slid across the crowd, hunting for loyalists, for men he'd controlled for years. A few stepped forward instinctively, but stopped when others grabbed their arms, shaking their heads. Rollins' power fizzled like smoke in wind. The spell was broken. He took one step back toward the church door. Elias spoke quietly. "Don't." But Rollins bolted. Briggs grabbed for him but missed as Rollins dashed inside the church. Elias was off his horse before Emma could blink, sprinting after him. "Elias," Emma cried. She ran, following them through the open doorway. The church interior was dim, lit only by flickering lanterns. The air smelled of candle smoke and dust. Rollins scrambled toward the back hallway, knocking over a pew in his haste. Elias tackled him near the pulpit. Rollins twisted wildly, grabbing a metal candlestick and swinging it with surprising strength. It struck Elias' injured ribs. Elias grunted, collapsing to one knee. No, Emma screamed. Rollins lunged toward her. For a heartbeat, she saw the man who had buried her husband, then visited her home to guide her, then plotted to silence her forever. She saw the storm of years bottled in one moment, and she did not falter. Emma grabbed the heavy Bible lying on the altar, the same one Rollins used to justify every cruelty, and slammed it hard against his arm. Rollins shouted in shock, dropping the candlestick as he stumbled back. Elias surged forward again, this time pinning Rollins to the floor. Briggs burst in with Caleb and slapped cuffs on the pastor's wrists. Rollins writhed, screaming, "You'll all burn, every one of you. God will strike this whole town down." Briggs hauled him up roughly. "Maybe, but not today." Emma stood trembling, clutching the edge of a pew, heart hammering so violently she thought she might faint. Elias moved to her side immediately. "You okay?" he whispered. She nodded, tears burning her eyes. I did it." "No," Elias said gently, brushing away a tear with his thumb. "You survived it, and you broke his hold. That's strength." Emma leaned into him, breath shaking, letting the reality sink into her bones. Outside, the storm finally broke rain slamming against the church roof in heavy sheets. But for the first time in years, Emma felt the storm wasn't against her. It was washing everything clean. The story, A Widow Left to Die, reminds us of something simple but profound. Sometimes life is so challenging that there seems to be no way out. But it is in the most abandoned moments that people find their true strength. Emma Carter didn't just survive because of a kind man. She survived because she dared to believe, dared to stand up, dared to speak the truth that had been buried for years. And Elias Morgan, with the quiet, tolerant, and resilient spirit of a man from the West, reminded us that kindness never goes out of style, especially for older audiences, those who have gone through enough loss to understand the value of kindness. The story's biggest message is this: healing is real, not through miracles, but through people, through those who have the courage to stay, listen, and love. Thank you for taking the time to read this story. If you find it meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel so we can continue to bring you stories that touch your heart. Sincerely,